Hopefully it'll work now. Okay, welcome to the class. We started last week discussing other relevant issues. Actually, this would be fine, whatever you want. Other relevant issues to women in shul. And we got started with a discussion of Kaddish, women saying Kaddish in shul. We said that historically it wasn't done, but that there is nothing halachically wrong with it, and that a woman should try to say it if she insists on saying it in shul. There are rabbis who do allow it, and there is a halachic basis for allowing it, so that there are arguments on both sides, let's put it that way, and an individual rabbi would have to make an individual decision about whether or not he will allow that. But strictly speaking, again, there's a precedence. Where there's a precedence, there's a way in halacha. So that was our discussion of Kaddish. Then we discussed tallis. Yes?
Answer your question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I guess my impression is if a woman wants to show up every morning or evening and say Kaddish in shul, nobody objects to that.
Absolutely.
Right?
Actually, I just had this. The question for our viewers was, does anybody object to a woman showing up in shul and saying Kaddish? So Miriam had a similar question. Do you mind if I? Miriam had a similar question for me yesterday about a woman going to daven in general and showing up at shul to daven with a minyan, and the answer is the same in both cases. Women are welcome to show up and encouraged to do so, because we acknowledge that there is a certain power in a communal prayer. And a communal prayer means davening with a minyan, all right? So we have God listens to the strength of our connected voices when we're doing something in a united way that comes together for a holy purpose. We have a powerful voice, and so obviously shul would welcome a woman. There's nothing. Nobody should ever look askance, even ever in a shul of any kind, look askance at a woman wanting to come and daven with the minyan. Obviously, she'd be in the women's section, where but there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It's unusual. It's very unusual. And it's not typically done. Women typically do not come to weekday minyanim. I told Miriam the story that when I was in graduate school, I had a friend who was just learning about the religion, and I brought her home to Flatbush with me once for Shabbos. And she decided she would like to go to Friday night services. So we went across the street to the shul that my father davens in, and the gabbai or the shamash, he had to unlock the women's section for us. The lights were not on because no women typically go on Friday night. At this time, nobody did, and so they had to unlock the door for us, But there was no problem in our going. There's absolutely no problem in our going. So now again, when it comes to Kaddish, you asked me last week about will Rabbi Bowman allow it? And the answer to that is I don't know. You'd have to ask him. Again, there's precedence to go either way. There's a tradition that women don't. There's also a tradition that women do. There's in Eastern European countries, women and girls did say Kaddish. There is that precedence as well. So from both points of view, you could go either way. You could do it, you could not do it, and it would depend on the individual rabbi and what the rabbi feels would be appropriate for his congregation. But certainly going to a minyan and I would approach Rabbi Bowman and ask him if that would be okay, just out of courtesy for what he would prefer to do. At the Torah Center, certainly it's not an issue at all. You can go and you can say it with the men, you can say it alone, that's fine. That's we're taking the that road, the lenient road, if you will. Okay, but there definitely is precedence for allowing a woman to say it, certainly with men and even without men. But again, you'd have to ask the individual rav of an individual shul what he is going to make his decision, what decision he'll make. Okay, so moving on to tallis, the issue of tallis. Now we discussed this as not only a mitzvah that she's not obligated to do, right? We discussed it that it's a very unique mitzvah in that it's also a mitzvah that men are not obligated to do. What do I mean by this? The mitzvah says that in the event you wear a four-cornered garment, you need to attach tzitzis to them. Okay, so it's only for men it's an optional mitzvah in that sense, because they know they don't have a requirement to seek out a four-cornered garment. They don't have they're not obligated to go look for that kind of garment. Today nobody wears that kind of garment, therefore it's not an obligation even for men. So for a woman it's doubly not obligated. It's a double removal from the mitzvah. Okay. We also talked about the tallis being a male garment, and there is a commandment from the Torah that says we're not allowed to wear garments of the opposite gender. Okay, so and then there's also an idea of not doing something that has the look of religious arrogance. That I want to do something because I feel myself to be holier than all the other people. And I gave examples of this, which is, that a person is not allowed to wear mourning clothes for the temple and Jerusalem, because that is a way of showing that he's holier than everybody else. He cares more about the loss of Jerusalem. It is a way of expressing a holier than thou attitude, and we don't do it. There's another example that says that a bridegroom on his wedding night does not say Shema. Because his head is not there. He doesn't have the concentration necessary to say Shema. The Shema is a very important prayer, and so we don't require him to do it. So as a result, the Gemara talks about how he should not do it, and that if he does it, he is again showing that he is considering himself above the normal, holiness of everybody else. He's somehow better. He'll be able to concentrate. It's an arrogant attitude. So here with tallis, we have a similar idea that a woman who wears a tallis wants to show that she's more holy than the other women. Now, then we also discussed how you could do it. We discussed wearing it under the clothes, as opposed to over the clothes. It's, in other words, tzitzis, which is the parallel mitzvah. Tzitzis and tallis are really part of the same idea, part of the same mitzvah. So that was tallis. Could you wear it at home under your clothes if you really feel you need to wear tallis? But we did talk about last week other ways of concentrating on one's prayers, and it's not really even a matter of tallis. The reason that men wear tallis at prayer time is so that they can get a chance to make a bracha over the mitzvah of tzitzis, which they don't do it in the morning when they put on their underclothes tzitzis, because there's some disagreement as to whether the tzitzis that the men wear under their clothes actually fulfills the mitzvah of tzitzis. So, but when they put it on tallis, they can make a bracha on that. So that's the reason for that. Okay, I think we've started talking about tefillin as well. Did you have any questions, Alice, about that, about tallis?
No, I think that's good. I guess I see it as Judaism, you're trying to think about others more than yourself so much, and not to have a big ego, because that gets in the way of your serving Hashem and helping other people. And so if you're thinking about, as a woman, I'm going to have a tallis. I mean, it's what you're saying, it's a kind of arrogance where you're really thinking more about yourself than serving Hashem.
Right, and that is a problem with the attitude of a lot of women, a lot of feminists who, coming from a different tradition in Judaism, looking at the Orthodox way of doing things and the Orthodox role of women, and having a problem with it, because what they're not understanding is that to us, to the Torah, the important thing, as you said, is how am I serving God? How am I going to fulfill my role on this earth? And again, coming with the a priori of the assumption that the Torah and Hashem dictated a certain way that I'm going to pray and a certain way that men are going to pray, and also understanding that those ways are equal, that they are equal, they're equally important, they're equally spiritual, and they have equal power in terms of allowing me to fulfill my role on earth. So understanding that is a very different philosophy from where the egalitarian philosophy comes from, which is a matter of rights and not obligations. And remember, we talked about that the issue for us is never a right. We don't have a right to daven. We have an obligation to daven.
Okay.
And so it's a whole different philosophy, which I would like to talk about in depth when we talk about the women of the wall and actually changing halacha, which I will discuss. Okay. Okay. So now we get to the issue of tefillin. Okay, tefillin. There's a mitzvah from the Torah that it's a time-bound mitzvah, so women are exempt from it, of course. This is the mitzvah of that men have to wear phylacteries on their head and on their arm. Now the mitzvah, as I mentioned last week, the mitzvah actually, the commandment says that men should wear them all the time. Okay. The problem is that tefillin, as a sacred object, has comes with a lot of restrictions. It is such a special object that the wearing of them entails tremendous mastery over one's thoughts and actually bodily functions as well. For example, a man has to have a completely clean body. He cannot be dirty, and he cannot pass wind. He cannot fall asleep accidentally. He cannot have his mind on anything else except holy matters. It's such a restrictive requirement that's why men do not wear tefillin all the time. It's too dangerous. It's too spiritually, so they limit themselves to wearing tefillin only during shacharis, only during morning prayers, because that at least they can more or less control during the time of prayer that their thoughts are holy. Okay? So it's you have to focus on the tefillin, you have to have a clean body, you can't forget they're on you, you can't fall asleep, you can't doze off. So there are all these incredible requirements that they have to constantly have them in mind. You can't have any idle talk, any idle laughter. Okay. By the way, a proof that we consider it such a restrictive mitzvah is the fact that we don't teach boys to do it until right before bar mitzvah. Now think about this. Boys and girls under the age of majority, 12 and 13 respectively, or 13 and 12 respectively, are not obligated to any mitzvahs. However, if you look around, a Jewish day school, you'll see the boys are wearing kippahs and they're wearing tzitzis, and they're dressed nicely and modestly, and they're eating kosher foods, even though they're not required to do. Why? Because we want to educate our kids in the way of halacha, in the way of the Torah, and mitzvahs. We want to get them started from the very first moment they can begin to understand and even speak. We're having them say Shema. We're having them say Shema at night and in the morning, and they're saying Netilas Yadayim in the morning. So we train kids from very young. The mitzvah of tefillin is a mitzvah we don't encourage them to do. We don't have boys do it because, again, it has such standards, high standards of holiness, that we say wait till you're obligated to do it. Now this is where women come in. Women are also not obligated in the mitzvah of tefillin because it is a time-bound commandment. So again, it's like this. So you're going to say, so men certainly don't do them. Do they live up to the standard? Right? If men can do it, why can't I do it? So the point is, men do not live up to the standard of tefillin. However, they are obligated. They're still obligated to do it. So if someone gives you a job and says you have to do this job, you're expected to do the job whether or not you're going to do it perfectly. Versus someone who is not obligated to a task. If you take on that task, you're going to be expected to do it really well, right? I gave the analogy of a classroom situation. There's a teacher, there's two students, one masters a math concept perfectly, and the second student does not have mastery of that math concept. They're both given the same worksheet. The teacher is going to have much higher expectations of the student who has mastered that concept. That paper better be perfect. Right? So it's the same kind of idea that women who are not obligated to this mitzvah, they are held to a higher standard. Therefore, because the mitzvah is so dangerous to do in a sense, spiritually dangerous, that we want to avoid the situation of doing it wrong. Right? It doesn't mean that men are more capable than women. It means that because they're commanded to do something, to do this, their capability becomes a non-issue. It's a moot point. Whereas because women are not obligated to do it, capability becomes a major element of this. And so therefore we want to just stay away from this. If we're not going to do it perfectly, we're not going to take it on. And again, I would say another concomitant idea to this that I brought up again is, before you take on this optional mitzvah, how about making sure you're really up to date and up to stuff on all the other ones that you're required to do, right? Pick a mitzvah that you're required to do. Let's take prayer, for example, which women are obligated in. Why don't you hone your requirements in the area of prayer? Why don't you really work on it? Maybe that means understanding the Shemona Esrei, the Amida prayer perfectly. Maybe it will mean having an extra level of concentration, saying the prayers more slowly. There's so many ways that we can perfect ourselves when it comes to prayer. That and again, the women who are making the argument that I want to do tefillin too, are making a different argument than I want to work on myself to perfect myself. That's not the case they're making. The case they're making is an egalitarian one of, I want to be like the men. And again, we don't come from that philosophy that what men do are better and therefore superior, and therefore I want to do it because I should have a chance to fulfill myself just as the men do. We believe that the Torah's way of having us do all the mitzvos the different way is a result of the differences in our natures, and that allows for the optimum spiritual growth of men and women respectively. And so if I understand that, if I believe that the Torah doesn't consider my spiritual life less important, then I am not going to need to take on an optional obligation that is not a better obligation than my own.
I think there's a real beauty in the Torah's recognition of the differences between men and women, and it's very beautiful.
I agree 100%, and I plan to spend a lecture or two on the Torah's understanding of, even though we really did that at the very beginning of this lecture series, but I think that it's worth doing again, the differences in the Torah's views of men and women. It's a foundational, discussion that, again, that's why we had it in the beginning, but I think it's worth going back to it. Okay. I heard a very interesting, Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan gives a very beautiful explanation, a more philosophical reason of why women are not obligated to tefillin. On a simple level, a mitzvah means a connection to God that comes from the root of tatzveh, mitzvah, saveh, so to connect. And it means establishing a link with God. And the most profound way to do this is to emulate him, to copy him. Women, naturally, and I mentioned this before, have a more natural, physiological, biological way of imitating God, and that's giving life. It's very unique, and it's incredibly godly. We can give life, and we're nurturers, we're givers, and that is the overwhelming, quality or characteristic of God is that he's full of chesed, kindness, and that he gives to us. So when we want to emulate God, women have a built-in advantage in this way. A man can't do that, right? And so the Kabbalists also teach us that the hand tefillin, the ones that go on your hand, represent the feminine element. There's a box that's hollow, and that represents the womb. And then the straps that wrap around your arm represent the umbilical cord. Isn't that nice? Yeah.
That's really true.
Yeah, that's what the Kabbalists tell us.
Wow.
It's a very mystical understanding of tefillin here. And so what a man is trying to do is basically trying to emulate a woman, copy what a woman has in her body, he's doing with the tefillin. So what a woman has her tefillin in her body, a man copies that with the actual tefillin. In addition, the tefillin are called the bayit, a house. The actual, the thing that holds is called a bias. A woman has her bias through which she nurtures her family and raises and teaches her family. And so, again, women resemble God through their tefillin, their home, their body, and a man does it through his tefillin. So in a way, you could look at it as man's way of trying to catch up with a woman and her abilities.
Mm-hmm.
Not, again, we're not saying that women are better than men. We're saying that they have more of a conduit. They have more of a natural propensity towards like a connection to God. That men have to do other things to work up to that. They have to work on themselves more in that way.
Channel their kibbutz, you said.
Kibush, the quality of conquering,
Mm-hmm.
the aggression, the testosterone, call it what you will.
Mm-hmm.
They have that added gift that we can see. I mean, men are the ones that make wars. Men are the ones that go out and conquer. A man, a man without a purpose of most men have a desire to provide for the family, to go out in the world and to have a job and do things that are productive. Everybody does, but they have this added element of, I'm going to go get it. And so to tame that, to channel it, as you said, is the purpose of the mitzvahs for men. And that's why they have more. That's why they're time bound, because they have to remind themselves at every point of the day. As I mentioned before, it's like in the morning before you rush off to work, you got to take the moment and recognize God is in this day with you, and recognize that He's giving it to you, and that you owe Him, right, everything that happens during the day. And then during the afternoon, you're in the middle of you're in the middle of a great $1 million contract, this great deal. You're out there and you're conquering, you're taking care of business. You got to stop. You have to stop, and you have to recognize, you have to give the recognition that God deserves. And again, at the end of the night, you come home and fix yourself a cocktail or a tea or a coffee or whatever it is. And before you go to bed, you got to do it again. You got to remind yourself. So they constantly have these constant time-bound reminders to rein in that conquering, ego-based characteristic. Yeah. Okay.
Can
Yes.
I contribute something here?
Absolutely. Yeah. Sure.
So I was reading about, I think it was some sort of Native American group, and I was reading about the sweat lodges.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, it's very, very interesting, the whole spiritual, whatever I got out of it. But they said something like this, that this was for the men, and it was to remind them that everything they did was for the women and children, and not for their own ego. So
That's a nice parallel, kind of. Yeah.
That they're out there and they're really hunters.
Right.
They really were.
Correct.
They're
Right.
going out there and doing their guy thing.
Right.
But to remind them they're doing it not for themselves.
Right.
But for
That's
the women
nice.
and children.
That's nice.
That was
Yeah.
very beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes, the whole sweat lodge was kind of like an ego destruction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
Ego destruction. I think that's a very nice way of putting it. I think I wouldn't say ego destruction, because I wouldn't use the word destruction, but ego. Let's see. Ego constriction, right? Maybe not destruction, but constriction is the idea. Is the goal.
It's too big.
Right. Right. No, because we can't lose a sense of our identity. We're not supposed to, we have an individual, being, and it's valuable in the eyes of God, and it's a valuable thing that we have to nurture, but we have to recognize that the ultimate purpose of that ego, first of all, is to subsume it to the will of God. Okay, so that when I get up in the morning, the goal is not what is going to make me feel good today, but how will my feeling good today, how will what I do to feel good, how is that leading me on the road to my personal role in life, my godly role in life? So that even if you can make the argument that going to Starbucks and having a nice latte in the morning, it makes me feel good, but if I'm aware that the ultimate goal of my day is to do mitzvos and to serve Hashem and to do what my role in life is, and to find out what that is, then even that has a worthy goal, and the end is to to bolster my body, you know, to start myself out on the right foot with a warm beverage to get myself going. The point is that to recognize that everything that we're doing has a holy end goal. And of course, when I drink that kosher beverage, and when I make a bracha on that kosher beverage, I am now elevating the very act of drinking that Starbucks latte to a holy act. And there, in and of itself, I have now done something holy with something as seemingly unimportant as having a Starbucks latte. So it's all about the attitude, the perspective. What am I doing this for? Why? What am I doing? Of being aware of when I make a bracha, I'm thanking God for this latte. I'm aware that it's not now something more than just outside myself, not just me that I want this drink, delicious drink, because it really fulfills me. But thank you, God, for letting me have this delicious drink, and all that. And the moment you do that, the moment you acknowledge God in the small details of your life, you're now living a holy life. You're living a Jewish life. You know, that's the whole point. So we move on now to Aliyah. We move on to Aliyah. So Aliyah means being called up to the Torah, right? Making a bracha over the reading of the Torah, and then standing there while the reader reads the Torah portion, and then you make another bracha at the end of it. So let me give you a little bit of history here. Aliyah has nothing to do with prayer, really, per se. We do it during prayer, because the only time we can make that bracha is when we have a minyan, a quorum of 10 men. Okay, but it's not really a part of our prayers. It connects to the mitzvah of learning Torah and reading Torah. Now, reading Torah as a communal thing goes back to the time of Moshe. All right, Moshe said that we shouldn't go more than 3 days without reading the Torah, and that was really a practical reason. We didn't have Chumashim, you know, the printed book of Torah, where we could just flip it open and see what does God say about this topic. It was all oral then, and so it needed to be reinforced, needed to be spoken constantly on a constant and repetitive basis. So originally also it was, the Aliyah was, you would go up and make a bracha and then read your portion. Originally there wasn't one reader. Originally it was just you read, but not everybody is proficient enough these days, and so we have one reader reading for everybody, which takes care of the mitzvah of listening to the Torah, and then the Aliyah is a rabbinical blessing, a rabbinical law, right? Mitzvah to read the Torah, and it's a kavod, it's an honor that men get. Now, so what about women? Can women get an Aliyah? Okay, so it's a little bit complicated, all right? Halacha, a strict halacha, says that a woman may get an Aliyah. Now, the Talmud discusses, the Gemara discusses this issue. Can a woman get an Aliyah? And according to halacha, the answer is yes, but the Gemara goes on to say, we don't do it because of kavod sibor, the honor of the congregation. Now, this concept, the honor of the congregation, is something that we see many times in the Gemara. It's discussed many times in the Gemara. However, never ever does they come out and explain what that means explicitly. So we have to sort of figure that out. The rabbis have had to come to an understanding of what does kavod sibor mean. What does it mean, the honor of the gathering, the congregation, the community? So we figure out the meaning from the examples that the Gemara gives of other instances of kavod sibor. Okay, so from that we're going to learn how this connects to women. What does it mean that women don't get an Aliyah because of the honor of the congregation? So the first thing it means is not inconveniencing the congregation. I'm going to give you two other examples. One example is we read that at the end of a service, when the Torah is finished being read, the Torah has to be packed up and put away. Right now, in the olden days, they would have to actually bring the Torah from someone's house, and it also involved, I guess, laying the Torah in a box that was covered with a beautiful cloth. So they would bring the Torah to the congregation, to the shul, And then after the reading, they would have to fold the Torah, roll the Torah up, cover it, which we do. But then they would also involve an extra step of taking the cover that was on the bima, the table where they read, taking that off, folding it up, putting it in the box. And the Gemara says we don't do that. We don't make the congregation wait for the cloth to be covered and folded up and put away. We don't make the congregation wait. We don't do that so that it's not a burdensome thing where the congregation is forced to wait around for that business to be done with. So that's one example of not inconveniencing the congregation. Another example is that on the days when we read a double portion of the Torah, when we have to take out 2 Torahs, we don't stand there and roll the Torah to the part where we have to read from, because that again means that the congregation has to stand and wait for the Torah for us to find the right place. So we don't do that, and again, because of kavod tzibor, the honor of the congregation, we don't want to inconvenience the congregation to have to stand around and wait, not sit around and wait. So if not troubling the congregation is an aspect of kavod tzibor, honor of the congregation, then this applies to a woman, because remember, she has to walk, if she's being called to the Torah, she has to walk from either the women's section or a balcony, which longer ago it was more common to have a balcony. And so again, there's this idea of having to wait for her to come from so far away. We don't want to inconvenience the kahila, the group. So that is one way to understand kavod tzibor when it comes to a woman's aliyah.
Well, you think they could get around that? If you know you're going to be called up.
But really, people don't.
You could do the Tarzan story.
People don't know they're going to be called up.
The Tarzan story.
The what? The Tarzan strategy? From a rope. So that's traditionally why it wasn't done. Okay. There's also another aspect of not inconveniencing the kehillah that connects to the idea of the ultimate goal of tefillah, of prayer. Okay. We learned that prayer has to be a matter of tremendous concentration, and that anything that takes away from that is forbidden, and the halacha reflects that. It's reflected in halacha. For example, you're not allowed to, when you're praying, hold anything in your hand, including a Sefer Torah, because your thoughts will be on that object. In addition, you have to avoid self-consciousness when you're praying, right? The goal of prayer, again, is to connect to God. So if I'm thinking about myself, how do I look, how do I feel, right, then I'm not going to achieve that goal. As a result, halacha again reflects that, because it says we cannot daven in front of a mirror. You cannot stand in front of a mirror when you pray. We cannot be self-conscious. So again, if total absorption, losing yourself in the moment, is the purpose, a woman walking to the front of a group of men is going to detract from the ability of the men to completely focus on their, because human nature is human nature. What men are stimulated by, a woman is a distraction. A man, let's face it, a woman walking into a group of men is a distraction. and suddenly, and this happens to women too, you get very self-conscious when a member of the opposite sex comes in the room. You start wondering, is my hair okay? Right? Do I have something on my nose? You start being self-conscious. Mm-hmm. And so again, out of respect for the congregation, we want to limit the distraction that a woman will present to a group of men who are trying to focus on the reading of the Torah. Okay. Now let's go back. There's another meaning of kavod tzibor, and again, we learn this out from examples in the Gemara. Another way of understanding kavod tzibor, honor of the congregation, is not doing something that reflects badly on the community. The examples that are given in the Gemara is that a person, for example, a person in ragged clothing is not allowed to read from the Torah. Now, how does this reflect badly on the community? It reflects badly because the fact that there is someone who can't afford decent clothing, says that the community is not holding up its job of being charitable, of making people have a dignified existence. So it reflects badly on the community if we're showing that there's a person in our community that's in ragged clothing. Okay, so it reflects badly. Another example is that we're not allowed to read. The halacha says you're not allowed to read the Torah from a chumash, from a printed book. It has to be from a scroll. Why? Because it might give the impression that the community doesn't own a Torah scroll, and that reflects badly on the community. Okay, so here too, it's out of courtesy for the men. Why? If a woman would go up to the Torah instead of a man, it would give the impression that none of the men present are capable of fulfilling their obligation. And again, this really goes back to, it's like the idea of outsourcing a job. If your boss has a project to do and he takes it out to another company, the implication is we can't handle it, right? Now remember that because this mitzvah of an Aliyah connects back to men's obligation to learn Torah, they have a higher obligation to learn it for its own sake, and so therefore it is sort of taking away the mitzvah, right, from men, or suggesting that they're not able to accomplish that mitzvah on their own. Okay, so it doesn't reflect well on the community. Okay. So that's Aliyah. That's it.
Oh,
there
was other stuff that I was hearing. A woman might be menstruating and she can't touch
I
it.
heard
and-
that.
No, that is mythology.
Oh,
I heard that too.
Absolute mythology. It's not
Actually,
halacha. Nothing in halacha says that. No.
I had even avoided going to shul on
Oh my
certain
God!
days.
No way.
Nobody told me
No.
otherwise.
I don't know where this mythology comes up. It's almost as bad as the hole in the sheet.
I got it from Jewish people in Jewish books.
Okay, it's not a halacha. It's not Jewish law.
Okay.
Does not say that a woman who is menstruating should not touch the Torah. No, not an issue.
I wish I had
So
known that then.
no.
I
The
think
answer is
sometimes
no.
people don't know and they come up with stuff and it just spreads. Like once I wanted to join, I wanted to know if I could join, what is it, Shalashudis with the guys.
Mhm.
So I was asking all these women, saying, "Oh well, I never see any women in there, and it's not. Maybe it's not modest." And they gave me all these reasons why. So then I asked the rabbi. He said, "No problem, come on in."
Which rabbi were you talking about?
This was Rabbi.
Oh, it was an Orthodox rabbi.
Oh
Yeah, sure. Yes, Barbara.
Rabbi Gettinger.
Yeah.
Here's the concept of separation of a man and a woman at the period. There's the separation. There is a concept of uncleanliness.
No.
A woman has her period.
No.
No.
Wrong. That is the question for those who didn't hear is there a concept of uncleanliness when a woman has to separate from her husband physically when she is menstruating? So first off, I will tell you that the word unclean is absolutely a misnomer. It's absolutely wrong when it comes to describing a menstruant woman. The word that the Torah uses is tameh, tum'ah, which has no English translation that will give you an accurate sense of what that state is. Furthermore, there are times when every Jew gets into that state, not just a woman. The state of tumah, which again the closest English definition, accurate definition, might be spiritual impurity, which is, again, the word impure is not accurate either. But it's not a physical condition. It has nothing to do with cleanliness of the body. It has nothing to do with cleanliness of the soul. Okay, and this is a topic on its own. So I will just leave it at that. Okay, we will get back to it at a future date. We'll do a whole, if I could do it in an hour, I doubt it, but we'll do an hour just on this concept of tumah. Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Leaving it alone.
Yeah.
But saying that during the period the woman has less spirituality.
No,
Absolutely not.
no.
Okay.
Woman does not have less spirituality during the time of nida, which is separation. mean the word nida indicates just separate. That's all it means. So during the time that she is separated from her husband, she has not one iota less spiritual status.
Is tummy, how do you say it?
Yeah.
Is that,
Tuma.
in any way,
Good.
in comparison to a Kohen being exposed to a cemetery or something?
Absolutely. That's exactly the same concept. And that's why I said that that multitudes of people, first of all, today, everybody, man and woman, is considered tameh, spiritually impure, due to our connection to death. In other words, we don't know. Your house could be on a cemetery. We don't know. We don't know. Hopefully, it's not. But there is no way of getting away from the connection to death today. Even if we could do that, we would need the temple to cleanse us of that impurity. Yeah, go ahead.
And therefore, would that not then impact on a woman
No.
touching the Torah
No.
at that time?
No, because as I said, today, men as well have the same, not the same exact thing, but men today, all the men who go up to read from the Torah are ritually impure, are tameh. So it has nothing to do with ritual impurity, touching the Torah. Okay, and again, we'll get back to the issue of this. This is a very complicated, complex, beautiful concept, tuma and tahara, purity, spiritual impurity. I want to just amend something that I said before. I said that there's no diminishing in spirituality when a woman is separated from her husband in that state. Insofar as her potential for spiritual growth and her value as a human being, there's absolutely no diminishment. But there is a sense that there is a loss of a potential, a spiritual potential for life. All instances and examples of tuma, spiritual impurity, are connected in some way to death. And so there is a spiritual degradation a little bit in that way, but not in the sense that she's less of a spiritual being. You know what I'm saying? Less connected to Hashem. No, absolutely not. All right, so we'll get to that another time. Let's now go to the next topic. We're up to women's prayer groups. Oh, goodness gracious. So okay. So now you might, so we've discussed all of these these issues, Aliyah, tefillin, tallis, right, being part of a minyan. We discussed all of these elements, and a woman might then say, Alice might say to me, okay, I understand the reasons for this, and I even agree to them. What if I want to make a women's prayer group? Can I go off and on my own with 10 women, or even 7 women, or whatever number I want, and have my own prayer group? What's wrong with that? And women have asked that question. Okay, so the first thing I want to tell you is women have always gotten together to pray, and they still do. Okay, traditionally they would gather in someone's house, and they would say tefillin psalms, which is something that one of the prayers that women take it upon themselves to say. Very nice thing to do. Or other tchinos, other special prayers for women. They've always gotten together to maybe on a Rosh Chodesh, which is our holiday, the holiday of the new month, is a special holiday for women. That was rewarded to us because we did not participate in the golden calf, the sin of the golden calf, right? So there have been, there's always times when women gather together. Today, in the age of the internet, they make worldwide women's prayer groups in terms of, we're all going to, on this particular day, on this particular time of day, and that at noon on Tuesday, we're all going to gather and say Tehillim. And again, the idea is that when we gather our voices together in a group, we have a more powerful, connection to God's ear, as it were. So there's that idea. So there's nothing wrong with women getting together to pray, right? Now, especially if women are going to restrict themselves in a women's prayer group, to the things that they're allowed to do without a minyan. Now, that means that they're not going to be able to say Kaddish. They're not going to be able to say Kedusha when they repeat the Shemona Esrei. They're not going to be able to say Baruch Hu. They're not going to be able to read from the Torah with a bracha. Those are all things that are only allowed in a minyan, which means a quorum of 10 men. Okay, so according to the letter of the law, that would be okay. But here's the problem. Okay, the problem is that, again, the philosophy behind the request. The philosophy behind the request is antithetical to Jewish philosophy. The philosophy behind the request is anything associated with men is obviously superior to anything associated with women. Men's ways of praying are better than women. That's the assumption that they're making, right? Because they want to do it the way men are doing it. Okay, this goes back to, in a secular way of looking at it. If you think about a woman who's a truck driver, for example, she's going to be lauded much and praised much more than, let's say, a female nurse, right? Because the truck driver is seen to be taking on a men's role, and how brave she is, and how wonderful that she's making inroads in that typically or traditionally male profession, right? So if you're looking at it just from the perspective of how well do I do a man's role, then it's great. But it doesn't. The value system doesn't allow for which of those jobs is more giving and nurturing and more appreciated and valuable in terms of serving society. We would say a nurse is much. I mean, on a certain level, it seems to be a more valuable job. But again, so it's again a difference in the philosophy. By women trying to mimic how men pray, right, even wearing tallis and etc., they again are believing that equality means egalitarian, meaning equality means sameness. Equality means, right, that I have to do everything that a man does. And what that does is basically it insults the Torah, because the Torah shows a profound concern and an equal concern for men and women in terms of their spiritual needs and their spiritual achievements, right? The Torah says, Hashem says, men and women are equal in my eyes. Okay, women are blessed with certain extra conduits to spirituality that men have, and therefore men need that men do not have, and therefore men need some extra strictures and structures of mitzvahs to get them to that level that women are able to be at. Fine. But basically, in terms of the spiritual perfection of both men and women, and again, that's the issue, right? The spiritual accomplishments, the Torah says men and women are equal. So now, in contrast to that, prayer groups make you lead to the conclusion that there's something missing from the Torah, excuse me, in terms of shortchanging women. The conclusion is that something's missing in the mitzvos that is not allowing a woman to achieve her spiritual greatness. And that's just plain wrong. That's just plain wrong. Okay?
It really denigrates women.
It not only denigrates women, it denigrates God, because it is suggesting that there's something lacking in the Torah, that women are not able to fulfill themselves, and that we're going to correct that mistake by making women do exactly what men do.
It also sets men up as a standard, which means why
Correct.
not set what we do up as the standard?
Exactly. It doesn't allow for the beauty of a woman's nature and role and way of doing things. Absolutely. Right. Okay. And also, there's something very ironic here, and that is the prayer groups are predicated on the assumption that tefillah is enhanced by the public roles that men do, right? So, but the irony is that in a halachic prayer group where you're not doing all the things I mentioned because you're not able to, because you don't have a minyan, that's not public prayer. Public prayer means prayer with a minyan. Public prayer means a minyan of 10 men. So if they're not doing all those things that a man is able to, that we're able to do when we have a minyan, then they're not doing public prayer. So they even don't accomplish their own goals from a halachic perspective. Okay? And it's also, again, the rationale is based on the idea that anything public is superior to private. We don't have that belief. Now, prayer is again, remember the definition of prayer is avoda shebalev, work of the heart. It is an internal, private work that we're doing. It should not have any pomp and circumstance. The shul does not have, any, aside from bringing the Torah around so that people can kiss it as it's walking up to the bima, there's no pomp and circumstance. There's no rabbi sitting on a higher platform. He davens, he prays with the congregation. There's no, even halacha reflects this. Chazal disapproved of seeking leadership roles. We're not supposed, men as well. Men are not supposed to seek leadership roles. Examples, when someone wants to be a prayer leader, it says, number one, he should wait till he's asked. He should not volunteer to do it. He should wait till he's asked in response to an invitation from a sense of obligation, and he should even go so far as to refuse the first time he's asked. Because we want to impress upon men that they're not supposed to seek the honors. Now, the fact that they do, and it's a fact of human nature, that men like the shul honors. Okay? The Torah doesn't view this as a positive. This is a foible. Now go to women. So if we're saying that it's not a good thing that men are seeking honors in the shul, why do we want to institutionalize that and say women should also copy it? All right, so there's that idea. There's also a concept that we have. Hillel said in Pirkei Avos, do not separate yourself from the community. Okay? Do not separate yourself from the community. And this is a very important concept. And again, it applies to men and women equally. But it applies in this situation here. Why do you want to separate yourself from a group, especially if in this community you're able to do certain mitzvos, right, that you can't do if you're going to separate yourself. So these prayer groups are meeting on Shabbos morning. That means they're losing out on reading the Torah with a bracha, right? Mm-hmm. So they're not even able to do. There's no mitzvah value in that prayer group. It's a ritual that's empty of a commandment aspect of it. So again, the purpose seems to be to copy the show of it, the outward, the publicity of it, the public elements of it, without having an intrinsic mitzvah value, and that's a sad thing. So again, it's strictly speaking, according to the letter of the law, yeah, if you're following the halacha, but what do you want to gain out of it? What's the end result? If the end result is just to look at the men, then no, you should not do it. Because to look at like the men is not, to look at the men and look like the men. That's not the goal of the differences in prayer. That's not the goal of how we're supposed to, an individual woman is supposed to approach the job of prayer. This also another concept, halachic concept, that says that something that gives the appearance of being wrong is in itself wrong. An example of this is why we don't mix chicken and dairy. The mitzvah against having meat and dairy is just meat and dairy, right? It's a rabbinical ordination that we also extend this to chicken, which is not considered meat halachically. It's a fowl, and that's a different category, halacha category of animal. The answer is from this idea of doing something that looks wrong is not in itself correct to do, because someone could look at it, I guess chicken might look like a piece of veal, and mistake it for meat, and then think it's okay. And so we're really not allowed. I mean, that is you can't get a bigger example of that concept than chicken and meat and dairy not being able to mix. And so here's a situation where a person might look at the women's group, not understand that they're maybe doing everything halachically, and say, okay, that's allowed. It's not in itself allowed to have a minyan. There's no such thing as a minyan for women. Okay. So that is women's tefillah groups. Do you have any comments? Yes, go ahead.
Well, it's not allowed on Shabbos to be, instead of going to shul, but it's allowed on non-Shabbos days.
Well,
to have a win-win.
Again, look, my daughter goes to Beis Yaakov High School. She davens, she prays twice a day, Shacharis and Mincha, with the entire school. They get together and they daven. So, yeah, are they allowed to do that? Of course they're allowed to do that, because they don't need a minyan to do it. But when you're doing it to make a point that I am just as important as the men, therefore let's make a minyan. It's not a minyan. It's not a public prayer. They pray together because they're individually required to pray Shacharis and Mincha. So they do it, and they do it in a group, because again, there's a communal feel to it. When you do something together, you get a little, bolstered by the group, and certainly the prayers have a more of a power to reach God in a sense. But it's not. But they never fool themselves that they are a minyan, a public prayer group. They are simply praying together, and again, that's fine. But I would say to a person who wants to form a women's prayer group for weekdays, great. You want to gather together. Why don't you go to shul and do it? Take your women to shul so that you have the opportunity for those extra prayers that you have when you have a quorum of men. If you want to, band together and do a group prayer thing, great. Do it in the shul. Do it in the women's section. You can have it there just as well as at home. And this way you have the benefit of all those extra prayers that you could do with a minyan. And on Mondays and Thursdays, listening to the Torah as well, reading the Torah, which you don't have an opportunity to do if you're doing it. So, yeah, they could get together and pray. It's as I said in the beginning, women have always gotten together to pray. Yeah.
So what is, I don't know that much about the women of the wall.
We're going to discuss. We're going to get to women.
that.
Well, what were we going to ask? We're going to have to
I
stop.
just-
We'll have to take that up next week. But go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but go ahead.
So, they're seeing themselves as constituting a minyan with the right to read from the Torah and say all the prayers that the men say. Is that their shtick? And then they want a separate. Well, they're thinking of giving them a separate section at the
Yes.
wall.
Yeah. A third section. There's a men's section, then a women's section, then the women of the wall section. Yeah, I heard that too. So we really have to pick that up next week, because that's a whole other discussion in itself. And I have their mission statement, and I'm going to read their mission statement and go through it with you. And so, I mean, you can't get better than their own words, right?
Right.
And in terms of understanding what their purpose and their goals are, and how that, what that looks like from a Jewish perspective, from a philosophical Torah perspective. So we'll get to that next week.
They should
Okay.
have a section at the wall for, lesbian women at the wall.
Right.
They should have a section